everyone, to the Daily Grind. My name is Kelly Johnson. Super excited. We are on episode 15 already, which is crazy. This is the best one yet, I would say. Super pumped for today's episode because we have a special guest on, and I would like to introduce her right away, Lydia Nader. She is a registered dietitian and sports nutritionist. She has her own business, Run Performance, marathon runner, and more. She's been featured on blogs, podcasts such as The Health Warrior in Charge, worked with athlete-minded brands like Nike and Edge. She also serves as a registered dietitian with her own business, Run Performance, and at Illinois Bone and Joint Institute. She coaches athletes on nutrition to maximize their training and racing goals, loves to empower athletes to become the best versions of themselves through nutrition and through her running experience. Without further ado, welcome to the show, Lydia. Woo!
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Kelly.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. I'm super pumped to talk about a ton of different topics with you. Running probably be one of the biggest and the most favorable with all the recent marathons going on too. I know your background. You've done, oh man, you have such a big running resume. It's crazy. You've done an ultra marathon. You've done a handful of marathons. You've done different road races. I guess maybe right off the bat, do you want to tell all the listeners how you got into running, what got you started, and now you're continually doing that in your career and just outside of work too?
Yeah, so that kind of all flows into the same thing, I would say. So I started running when I was 10 years old, officially running. I think my parents would probably tell you I was running around like a crazy child. Officially a runner when I was 10 years old. And I was given the opportunity. I just joined into a new school. They were kind of dealing with, I was homeschooled and then joined into a public school and I was struggling to make friends. And so had this opportunity to join a program that some of your listeners might know about called Girls on the Run.
Okay, yep.
A national nonprofit. Yeah. So joined that at 10 years old, and pretty much I can say the rest is history. Was found out that running was a gift that I had and I was talented at it. And the program also connected me with friends that I'm still friends with today, 18 years later. So wow. I would say that Girls on the Run really made a huge impact. And then also just going into starting my own business and being who I am today, the lessons that I was taught outside of through the program really are instrumental in terms of self-confidence, how to build relationships, how to have tough conversations. There's conflict, all of those kind of life lessons that are taught with the objective of doing running activities really shaped me who I am today, honestly, in terms of as a business owner, as a dietitian, and then ultimately as a runner.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. That's so cool that the sport of running can take you in different directions. Did you see from a young age, or I guess maybe before college or less than high school, did you foresee yourself in this position where you are right now, having Run Performance?
I laugh because absolutely not. If you had even asked me when I was in graduate school, which was, only about 4.5, almost 5 years ago, that I would be running my own business, I would have said, you're crazy. Absolutely did not think this would be something I would be doing. But honestly now can't imagine my life without it. I was just having a conversation with someone the other day, and I said, there's some people who just are really happy in a 9 to 5. I'm just not one of those people. And so having my own business has allowed me to have that I work a lot of hours, but I'm doing things that I love and I'll be able to also do the running that I love. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like it's a really good fit for personally and for your career and what you do. And I know I know for sure you inspire a ton of athletes out there, not just running, but people that do other sports as well, or just trying to stay active or get back into shape if they have a low point or injury, etc. You have definitely a great experience to share with everyone. So I guess with Run Performance too, do you want to tell our listeners a little bit about your business and different challenges that you have faced?
Yeah, so I think a lot of times we see through social media or maybe just online in general, we feel like everyone kind of maybe has their own either side gig or they start their own business or those things, and it looks all fun and dandy. It's hard work. It's not by any means an easy thing. There's days when I want to just hang up my hat and not do it, but then there's other days where I'm reminded easily of why I do it. So when I graduated from graduate school with my master's and then also as a registered dietitian, I knew that I wanted to work with motivated individuals and found that when you become a dietitian, you have this great opportunity to work in many different settings and many different areas of nutrition, such as community nutrition, clinical nutrition, which can be where you work in a hospital, getting different experiences in different areas of a hospital and different units, food service, in sports nutrition, you name it, wherever a dietitian could work, you get that experience. And so when I left my program or graduated from my program, I really wanted to make sure I was working with motivated individuals and be challenged. And I felt like the athletic population was motivated, and they also were, they wanted that change. And nutrition, I have always felt like from my young years, where my mom was very adamant about proper nutrition as a runner, where all of my teammates around me were eating McDonald's and they seem to be performing just fine, but I always felt like nutrition made a very big impact in me still being able to run at a pretty high level even now, whereas I look back at some of those high school teammates and some of them are not even running anymore. Maybe they dealt with a lot of injuries or things like that. So I believe that nutrition is kind of that missing key for a lot of people. So I was surrounded, luckily at the time of ending graduate school, by a lot of entrepreneurial-minded individuals. And they kind of said, well, like, why don't you start your own business? Because I was getting a lot of rejection when I was applying to sports nutrition specific positions, especially in Chicago, Illinois, which is where I had just finished my master's. Mm-hmm. And I was feeling super discouraged. I didn't know if I'd be able to get into sports nutrition. And I heard horror stories from a lot of dietitians where they maybe didn't get into the sports nutrition realm they wanted to, so they just took any job, but then they got stuck for many years. And that was something I didn't want to do, because for me, we'll probably get into this a little bit more, but why I started running marathons was because my uncle, who was very big influence on my running longer distances, he passed away when I was a senior in college, in undergrad, from leukemia. And it was really sudden. He was, in his 50s, so it was kind of not out of nowhere, but he was getting better. And then because of the bone transplant, he actually passed away within 24 hours when we thought he was actually getting out of the woods because of infection. And that really hit me pretty hard. Mm-hmm. And I decided that I didn't want to live my life in regret at any point, because I never know what could happen the next day. And so that decision was like, okay, I'm not going to say I'm too busy to run a marathon. I'm going to go run a marathon. So that's when I started training for my first marathon. And that same decision has kept me going and starting Run Performance Nutrition even now. It's been a journey and learning. I would say the last year has been when things have clicked. I've done a lot of hard work over the last 3 years to build this brand, but the last year is when things have clicked. I've done a lot of learning and absorbing of information out there, seeking advice from peers, and it's just really taken off this year, and it's been really cool to see.
That's awesome. So inspirational. And you definitely have that inner drive, that motivation, connected with your family. And then also now you're inspiring not just family, friends, but everyone else at your running network, basically. Learning entrepreneurship, I'm assuming with your graduate classes, you're able to take that's helped push you and given you success. With the clients that you had, you're in touch with them regularly and you see them, or they stay in touch with you and you can see their results. Do you have any stories, whether it's running or just athletes in general that you've worked with that you've made a difference with?
Yeah, well, there's a lot, honestly, but a lot of them that come to mind, two specifically. One was actually an Ironman athlete, so I would put the athlete in probably the master's athlete category, so above 50 years old, and had done an Ironman last year and was super just disgruntled by the whole experience. He barely finished throughout the entire Ironman distance and had a lot of GI issues, couldn't keep food down, just wasn't even sure if he wanted to ever try to do it again. But he kind of thought, okay, there's a way to kind of do this the right way. And so we ended up sitting down after that Ironman experience and coming to find out that we found that there was hydration was a big factor that was going on for him, and that he was dealing with a little bit of dehydration and electrolyte imbalancement, as well as not intaking enough energy ultimately. In an Ironman, you're out there for, for your listeners who maybe aren't super familiar with triathlons or Ironmans, you're out there. If you're not one of the top pros, you're out there for 10, 12, 14 hours sometimes. And that's, how many meals do we eat in a day over 12 hours? We eat a lot of food when we're not even doing an activity like an Ironman. So we were able to kind of pinpoint his sodium intake through sweat testing, his hydration needs, and his ultimate carbohydrate needs. And he actually just did half Ironman to trial everything a few months ago. And he said it was one of the best races he's ever had. And so he ended up signing up again for the same full Ironman that'll be happening next month in Arizona, and he's feeling super confident about it. So that's just something that's really cool to see him come from a really like negative headspace and experience and take the kind of bulls by the horns and, be able to apply that nutrition to his race day.
Really great story on the Ironman. I've not done one yet. I give huge kudos to those people out there. Like you mentioned, they're out there for how many hours? It's like me eating just food and watching them on the TV.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, like, even from a running standpoint, oftentimes, like, I can even say, like, I probably had 5 or 6 athletes over the past year where the commonality with them has been eat more on your race day. And they think I'm super crazy. They give me this look when I tell them, like, hey, based off of what you told me to eat on race day and the symptoms you're having, like, this could really benefit you. They usually look at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, trust me. And they trust me. And then they go into race day and they either end up getting a actual time PR or they end up having the best nutritional race they've ever had, where they don't have GI issues and maybe they've always dealt with GI issues. Or they feel super fatigued when they're done with their race, and they feel like they still have more energy when they cross the finish line. And just little things like that they think I'm crazy, but they take the advice and they see and feel that difference. And that's, I think, what really makes the difference for a lot of athletes is when they feel that difference, they are believers.
Yeah, and then they see the physical results, like they said, they improve time, or they just feel overall their body feels 100% better. Too, like, I follow you on Twitter as well. Hashtag Wisdom Wednesday. I see a lot of posts that you've done based on nutrition before race day, after race day, recovering. Myself, I'm training for a marathon later in mid-December, the Mississippi Gulf Coast Marathon. So I'm on week 9 of my training so far. I don't have a nutrition program, but I try to eat healthy when I can. I don't have any, like, this upcoming weekend, I don't have a marathon, obviously, but I have, I'm doing an 8K, I'm doing the Hot Cider Hustle in Chicago. There's a lot of listeners out there that they're not training for a marathon, but they do, or they partake in a lot of the shorter races, the 5Ks or the 10Ks. Are there big differences between nutrition for the smaller races versus the Ironmans and the marathons?
Yeah, absolutely. So what you consume before, maybe a shorter distance race. And kind of the similarities, I'll start with that, are usually you want to focus on simple carbohydrates. So what simple carbohydrates are fruit, are going to be dairy, are going to be usually refined sugars, refined grains, so not your whole grains or things like that, because we want to usually keep it super simple, easy to digest, so you can get that quick energy. So that's going to be beneficial on morning of for both short and long distances. The biggest difference that you would see in terms of those two distances would be the amount that you would actually eat that morning of. So like for a marathon, I would recommend someone typically have a lot more than they maybe are having. Maybe they're like, I only eat a banana before a marathon. Well, that might be really great for a 5K or an 8K, but think about how long you're going to be out there for the marathon, and think about you're just woke up, you're coming off of a fast, you want to replenish your glycogen stores so that you have that energy. And I also like to tell athletes, would you want to carry more on you, so in terms of fuel for the race, or would you want to have that already eaten and taken in before you get out there? Most of the time they take that second option because they're like, I don't want to carry anything more on me while I'm running.
Mm-hmm.
And the night before is also crucial, especially for marathons. You want to keep it pretty simple with the carbohydrates. It doesn't necessarily have to be simple carbohydrates. The simple foods that people like are either potatoes, it can be regular potatoes or sweet potatoes, whole wheat pasta, quinoa, farro, so ancient grains. Those types of things are going to be a good option. Starchy vegetables, usually keeping it lower fat types of meats. The highest fat type of meat I usually do is oftentimes like salmon for the omega-3s and anti-inflammatory that you can get from that type of fish. But really keeping it, making sure you have a little protein before in that night before, and then simple carbohydrates or some good carbohydrates before.
Thank you for sharing that. I know also too, nutrition, it's not just important just the day before, but even the week of or weeks leading up to your training, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So you probably saw on Twitter, but I post a lot about taper week. And, if you're doing those longer distance races, typically it takes, 1, 2, some athletes even take 3 weeks of taper. And your nutrition changes in those taper weeks. And it's less about carb loading and making sure you have plenty of energy, and more about stay healthy, keep your immune system going, keep your muscles fueled, keep them healing, so that when you get to race day, you are at the best possible position you can be. Your muscles are fully healed and ready to go and power you through. Your glycogen stores are topped off, so your fuel tanks are ready to go. And mentally, you feel confident in your own nutrition and your own training to go after that PR.
That's really, really helpful for all our runners out there listening to our episode today. Lydia, let's maybe I'm so motivated now to like go run a marathon or something like tomorrow. Transitioning into the running and the marathon side. So your background on marathon running, I know you touched a little bit with your uncle inspiring you to run your first marathon. What has been your inspiration to continually do marathons? Or I know your latest one you did was Berlin, right?
Yep. Berlin in Germany.
Mm-hmm. How was that experience?
It was amazing. It was my second time doing the Berlin Marathon. I didn't necessarily go into that race. We had a great training cycle. I was doing that daily grind of really, focusing in on my private practice, my business, and making sure that I was really focusing in on my athletes and giving them the best of me. And sometimes that meant sacrificing my own training. I want to give them the best that I have of myself. And so I didn't necessarily go into it thinking this is a PR, even though it's a PR type of course. But I went into it with this kind of open-minded experience of what was going to happen. By no means was it my, best marathon in terms of time, but I had a great opportunity to be able to run with my boyfriend the entire time. Got to practice a little with my nutrition on the way. It ended up being a little bit more humid than expected. It rained a lot on race day. He's chronically dehydrated. We're working on that, but he ended up getting some cramps during the race, and so had to feed him some salt tabs to try to help him a little bit. So I got to practice my dietitian skills while on course. Mm-hmm. But we were able to finish together, and Berlin has a special place in my heart. It's where my current marathon PR is held from 2017. Mm-hmm. It's really come out and cheer really great. A kind of fun fact that I love to share with people who've never run maybe an international marathon, and especially women and female runners. We are really privileged in the United States to have the opportunity to recreationally run and train. And when you go to other countries in Europe or really anywhere in the world, that ability is not always there for a lot of female athletes. So we are used to probably watching races and we see a lot of women running. And I think I saw a statistic that like 60% of like these major marathons in the United States are women now, so it's more than men. Well, you go over to Europe and it's not the case. It's more men than women. and most of the women that are in the race are American. So when you're running through the streets of Berlin, or I've done another European marathon as well, you're running through the streets as a fast female, or just as a female in general, the spectators that are females get so excited because they're not used to seeing a non-elite athlete or professional athlete running a marathon. They think it's the coolest thing. They're cheering you on. That's really like female empowerment. And it's something that I didn't really realize until I'd done another marathon after the 2017 Berlin Marathon. It's just a really cool experience to see that. And it was also cool for younger girls to see that. And we've all been at those marathons where, you know, the kids have their hands out to you know, clap hands as the runners go by. And after that Berlin experience for me in 2017, and also my background with Girls in the Run, whenever I'm running a marathon, if I'm not going to impede another runner or, you know, get in their way, I always try to high five those girls because I want them to see that, like, no matter where they come from, no matter what type of athletic ability they are, marathoning can really open up a lot of doors, and just running in general, and see a strong female going out there and training and being fit, and not necessarily think that females have to look a certain way. Something I really love about Berlin and just European races in general.
That's really interesting. I've not done a European race before, or outside the U.S. I'm hoping to get into Berlin next year. I'm entered the lottery, so I don't have the elite super elite running qualifying time yet. I'm still working on that. But that's really interesting. I guess since you've done New York before and Chicago, how does the Berlin Marathon compare in regards to like spectators, like the cheering, the atmosphere, the crowds?
So I might not be the best person to ask, since the 2 times I've run Berlin, it has been raining. So everyone I've always talked to has said that Berlin Marathon has amazing spectators. They really come out, and they do have really great spectators. But I would say the 2 years I've run it, that it hasn't been what other people say that it can be. You know, unfortunately, I haven't run the Berlin Marathon when Eliud Kipchoge has run it, so probably less people came out those 2 years. But I would say, in terms of the spectators, New York is really the one that people come out in droves. I mean, other than when you're on the bridges, there's people around you. There's people yelling and screaming and cheering you on. New York really comes out and really supports, so it's awesome to see that.
That's it. Yeah, it definitely, I would say, not just even for the marathon length, but even other lengths, like doing a half marathon or even shorter distances, the weather definitely definitely has an impact on who comes out to be along the side. Or I know too, I didn't run this year Chicago, but even me tracking some of my friends, it was really cold that day, so I'd like run into my apartment, then run back out to cheer, and then run back in to warm up. But I like what you said earlier too, just to inspire younger girls out there to run. I try to do the same thing, high five, or when I'm finished with a race, like try to, like, not from the marathon distance, but like even the shorter road races, like definitely cheer on all the young girls out there still running towards the end, like, you got this, and things like that. Because I know, like, when I was younger, I didn't start running as early, but I know when I was younger, like, hearing other people cheer you on is definitely plays an influence, and it's positive. It's a positive impact, hopefully, on their lives down the road.
Yeah. So I actually have a fun story too. So I did the Copenhagen Marathon in Denmark, other European race, and I had a horrible race. I had a pre-existing injury that I thought was pretty healed up, and I could probably go for my PR. Ended up not being the case, and the injury flared up worse than it had been before, and so had a pretty rough go of it. But there was the point at the race, was the second half of it, where I was kind of walking, look at it, really like just disappointed and upset. And I saw this little girl with her hand out, and I kind of like, my brain was not firing on all cylinders at that moment. And I kind of ran by, and it didn't register to me that her hand was out until I was already past her. And I made a split-second decision that I was like, I'm going to literally turn around and go high-five this girl, because I might not be having a great day, but I know that this could be impactful for her. I don't know if it will be, but this could be. So like I made this conscious decision in that moment. I was having a horrible day, but I turned around, I high-fived her and smiled at her and kept on going. And for me, I don't know what impact that made or if it made an impact at all, but it really changed my mindset for the rest of that race.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. That's a great running story. We need more Lydias out there running marathons. For real though. But
well,
yeah.
So for me, it's like, I think, you kind of asked this question a little bit earlier, and I don't know if I necessarily answered it before, but, you kind of went to what keeps me motivated now. Like before it was my uncle, and my uncle's memory still is definitely a big part of why I continue to do this, and it affects me when I do marathons. But when things get tough and, there's aches and pains, because it's never just going to be easy. Not every race is easy by any means, no matter what the distance. But I think about the amazing ability that I'm able to be running, to be moving my legs, to have that ability. And for me not to be out there doing that, I feel like that's a kind of sacrificing the gift. I think that's a Steve Prefontaine quote, to give anything less than your best is to sacrifice the gift. And for me, I just know and have met so many people who have less that they could give, but give more than I do. And so for me not to go out there and try to empower more people to go do this, because I believe it's something that has truly changed my life. So when things get tough, I just kind of tell myself, hey, like, I have the ability, I can do this, I can push through this, and there's another side to this.
Yeah, really good point. If I have even earlier today, I was doing one of my training runs, only 5 miles during lunchtime, but I was definitely in work, super busy. I just wasn't really feeling it. But then I thought to myself, I read this in an article, or someone was interviewing one of the marathoners after New York, I believe. I'm able-bodied. There's other people out there that are injured, or they're not able to run or even walk or do things. So that just that's been my current, I guess, motivation, just to kind of get myself in the zone with the Chicago weather being really crappy to run outside. But thinking to myself, there's other people out there that don't have a chance to run, whether it's a physical limitation or something, or even with their job or whatever situation they're at. If they're not able to run, but I should go out and run regardless. And know too, after you go on a run, you feel a lot better.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's that ability that I have that ability to go do this. And when I get upset, and we all have the right to be upset at things and be frustrated, but I always try to go back to I have the ability to do this, I should go do it. And so just kind of taking that to heart, I think it makes a big difference in your training, not just on race day, but kind of finding that motivation, like you said, here in the Chicago winters. We need that, we need that motivation, wherever it's going to come from. So yeah, absolutely agree with that.
Of all the marathons that you've done so far, what has been your most favorite one?
Oh, I knew you were going to ask that. And so I would say my absolute favorite marathon is probably the New York Marathon. It's hard because I think New York, for me, because of the crowd support, it really made a big difference in terms of just seeing the city. That was only the second time I'd ever been to New York, was to run the marathon, and I just love the energy that they bring. Honestly, that the city brings, not even just the runners, but that the city brings. It's just a really supportive atmosphere. It's not where my PR is held, like I said before, but there's just something about that race that makes a big difference. So yeah, I think the New York Marathon is one of my favorites.
Do you also, when you sign up for a marathon, do you have a plan in place, or I'm gonna run New York City Marathon this year, or I'm gonna do Berlin this year? Do you have a goal in mind, I want to run these marathons down the road, or is it just kind of based on your daily grind schedule?
I would say it's haphazardly chosen. It's not premeditated at all. I pretty much stuck with Chicago for many years because I lived here. I'm originally from Ohio, so that's where my first 2 marathons I ran were at. And then Boston was my fourth marathon that I ever ran. And then after Boston, I was in 2017, I was just really like upset. I trained really hard. I had a coach for the first time, and I just had a horrible race. I was very upset. I was like frustrated. And one of my friends, I'll definitely call him a friend, kind of preyed on that a little bit and was like, hey, like, he works for the American Cancer Society. He's like, hey, I have a bib for the Berlin Marathon. If you are interested, it's a really flat course. You can PR, these different things if you want to fundraise. And, you know, because of the reasoning of why I started running marathons, I was like, you know, yeah, I would love to like fundraise and support the American Cancer Society, since like I run because my uncle passed away from leukemia, and being able to provide that, you know, exposure and the fundraising was a really cool thing. And ever since then, it's kind of been like, oh, I'm doing this race, and then another one kind of falls into my lap, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll do another marathon. And somehow I just completed my 11th marathon, and I don't know how that happened.
That's awesome.
I'd say, so it's definitely kind of all kind of fell into my lap in really great ways. I never necessarily planned it out of which ones I want to do. People ask me, I think, for a while, they're like, you know, are you trying to do all the majors? And I said, no, you know, if it happens, great, but that's not like a goal of mine. My goal is to go out there and run with friends or run for a PR or whatever that looks like, because every race is a little bit different. It's not necessarily to run specific races. It's like, I don't know which ones I'll run. You know, a friend of mine who's from South Africa said, go do Cape Town Marathon. So who knows? Maybe that's on the calendar in the next year or so.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's so funny you said Boston's your fourth. Boston's going to be my fourth too. So I'm doing this one in December, and then Boston in next year for me. I was able to get in.
Awesome! Congratulations!
Yeah. So I'm super pumped for that. So yeah, do you have any insider scoop on Boston? What to expect?
So I would say 2 tips for Boston. Number 1, make sure you kind of learn or train with a second breakfast, because of the start is you kind of have point-to-point race. So if you've never done a point-to-point race, be prepared. It's going to be a little bit different, where you're bussed out to the start and you kind of sit there for a while. So that's why having a second breakfast is always really important, I think, for those situations. And then number 2, don't go out too fast. I would think everyone would probably tell you that, but it's really easy. The first half is really downhill, and the second half is when you start climbing the hills. So it is rolling hills, but it is a net downhill course. That's why, like, it cannot be a world record marathon course, because it's technically mostly downhill. And that'll get the quads for sure. And then you hit Heartbreak Hill, and you're like, wait, I've been running downhill this whole time, and now I have to climb up the hill. So just don't go out too fast. I know it's really easy to get excited. I've definitely done it myself. That would be the 2 biggest tips, I would say.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Super hilly. I've seen, like, the course elevation. Yeah, I guess following, like, the different marathons this year, or I guess the most recent ones, too, that have been in the news, like New York we just had this past weekend, and then Chicago a couple weeks before that. Do you have any, I guess, key takeaways from those races? Who finished top in both of them? I guess we could start with, like, New York. Jeffrey, I'm gonna butcher his last name because I'm not really good with pronunciation. Camor for the men's side, and then Jocelyn. What do you think of the results?
I mean, it was really cool to see. I think for me, from the New York side of things, seeing Des go out kind of early, I was like really rooting for her for sure, and I was really proud of her for making that move. Honestly, like, Mary Keitany is kind of a badass, and I honestly expected her to break the world record. You know, that obviously happened in Chicago from another runner, but I always felt like Mary had it in her, and kind of think she's an awesome runner. But it's cool to see Jocelyn kind of go out there and crush it with what I think is an intimidating runner, being Mary Keitany. So I think it was just really cool to see, and I think, you know, it's for me, when we look at those elite athletes that go in and how they train, and looking at that, and even, you know, going to, like, the unofficial world record that was set by Eliud Kipchoge from the male side. I think both male and female athletes in the running realm, they're just, like, the more humble they are, and how they train, and that's, like, their whole life. it just makes a big difference, and to see those results come through from a nutritional standpoint. It's awesome for me. I always look if they do reporting on what their nutritional intake was. There was a lot about Kipchoge and his nutritional intake, and I always use it as a good reference point for people. Like, hey, remember, when he broke the world record? Well, he took in 100 grams of carbohydrates per hour, and you're taking in 1 gel per hour. So not saying that everyone's going to feel like Kipchoge, but just see what he was able to do and what you're intaking and how much better you could probably do if you intook a little bit more. And I guarantee that that's what a lot of these athletes are doing, is really focusing in on their nutrition, not only in training, but then also on race day, as that makes a big difference. I mean, in New York, you have a lot of surges, as you saw, certain athletes made big plays. And so I think I once heard Shalane Flanagan talking about her, training, but also nutritional kind of plan when it comes to racing. And she talked about how you can have a game plan of what the race is going to look like, but sometimes athletes will go out and they'll surge, and you kind of have to answer that surge. And when you surge, it's like pushing the gas pedal down on your car. You use up more gas that way, so you use up more fuel in your body. So if you have more surges happening in race, you probably need to make sure that you have a backup plan at those fueling tables. Maybe an extra gel. Maybe you're going to take in more of the liquid, because let's be real, most of those elite athletes are not drinking everything that's in that bottle. They're taking as many sips as they can, and then they're throwing it away. You just kind of have to have that contingency plan too. But I guarantee you, I haven't seen anything, and it probably is out there, but I haven't really seen anything from the world record for the women in Chicago of her nutrition plan. But I guarantee it was probably somewhere close to what Kipchoge was intaking when he broke the world record.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about the Chicago Marathon and tie in nutrition. Did you have any of your clients race in Chicago or see their results?
Yeah. So I had about 5 athletes running the Chicago Marathon, all at different abilities, different places. I had a first-time marathoner and had a 7-time marathoner, so all different abilities in there for sure. I was able to kind of track them. I was running around cheering like a crazy person. I felt for Chicago Marathon, I felt like a athletic trainer, if anyone remembers their athletic trainer maybe from high school or something, that had the little fanny pack that had Band-Aids and all the little things. Well, I had a little fanny pack with salt tabs and different types of goos and gels and cliff blocks and anything a runner could need from a nutritional standpoint. I had that, and so when I'd see my runners, I'd be like, do you need anything? And how are you doing? Hydrate? You need to hydrate? You need to go grab Gatorade? And they all were so confident. They're I don't need anything. I'm good. I think I maybe gave 1 salt tab to an athlete, which made me super confident in the fact that they felt confident in their nutrition, that they were executing correctly, L20, and that they felt good up until the end. So that was really cool to see.
That's great. Yeah, they finished everything. Yeah, there was surprisingly the DNFs on Jordan Hesse and Galen Rupp from on the U.S. side, which was kind of surprising in Chicago. But Chicago it was a cooler temperature, but it wasn't the most ideal with the wind.
Yeah, it was very windy. Temperature, pretty good, a little cooler. And if you don't have a whole lot of body fat on you, it's a little bit chillier too. And the wind too, I mean, I was watching the elites come through for the Chicago Marathon, and when you're an elite athlete, they typically have really low body fat. I mean, that's just the reality of oftentimes the elite athletes. And, they were running by themselves a lot of times. There was very few packs oftentimes. And so it must have been even worse for them. I mean, they're fighting the wind. You that did have a pack, they tried to stay in that pack as much as they could and try to work together. Even though they're competing against each other, you could see them communicating with each other to kind of who's going to take the brunt of the wind here, and that sort of thing. So I think it made a big difference for them.
Yeah, I would agree, and it's so cool too. In our city, Chicago, that we have the women's world record now. Yeah, it's awesome. Puts us on the marks us down in the world map.
Absolutely. Hopefully that will bring more elites to Chicago. I know that's something that they've really been trying to work on by bringing back pacers for elite athletes. So she was able to have the 2 pacers that really for her blocked the wind. They were two larger guys, so they were able to block the wind for her and really get her to that world record on in October. So I think bringing back pacers, maybe Eliud Kipchoge will come back to Chicago and maybe he'll win it, like he did back in the day. So hopefully it'll bring more people back here to Chicago and see how it can be a world record course. Oftentimes people just associate Berlin Marathon to being a world record course, but Chicago can be that too.
Do you have any, I know it's still pretty far away, or it's coming up, it'll come up right behind us basically, but Olympic trials, do you have predictions on those?
I don't, just because I honestly feel like there's been a lot of injuries, Jordan Hesse and, Amy Craig and different elite athletes in that, and especially in the Nike realm, which I may be a little more familiar with than the other side of things. I think it's anybody's race, to be honest. I wouldn't say there's an American female that I say, like, yeah, she stands out a lot. Des Linden, I definitely think is going to be top three. I think that'd be a prediction I put out there, but it could be anybody's race because a lot of them have, qualified, but maybe they haven't run a marathon in a while. They've qualified for those trials, and who knows where they could be at now. Maybe they're, like Jordan Hesse hasn't done a marathon in, I'm trying to think how long it's been since she's actually run a full marathon or competed in it. And, she's technically going to run those. I mean, as of right now, she's going to run the trials and see, she could come out of nowhere and do really well. So I think that's where we don't necessarily know who's going to show up because it's not necessarily that they've even run a marathon in the past year.
That's true. Yeah. Really, really good point. Yeah. You never know. It's still a decent farther out, and like a lot of stuff is done behind the scenes of public. So I don't see this on social media as often, but you never know. People like, I didn't predict the world record gonna happen in Chicago on the women's side. I did not see that coming at all. So yeah, hopefully.
I don't think anybody did.
Maybe more surprises down the road, but never know. We'll see. I guess transitioning back into the real world of Chicago. I guess what other like running groups are you involved in city here?
Moved to Chicagoland area because I was technically out in the suburbs when I first moved here for graduate school. I really didn't feel like I had a place in the suburbs. I've never grown up in the suburbs. I honestly have never had any desire to ever live in the suburbs. So every weekend I would drive into the city from Naperville, Lisle area, if people are familiar with the Chicagoland area who are listening. And I would go to run groups or November Project or, different free active fitness groups to make friends, find that community, move to a new city all the way from Ohio, and wanted to just find like-minded individuals, and Nike Run Club was that for me. It was hugely impactful, actually, when I would drive in every Saturday morning and go do the long runs with them. Met Coach Robin Lalonde, who is one of the Nike Run coaches still to this day, owns Edge Athlete Lounge. She was very impactful in helping me and inspiring me to start my own business, an entrepreneurial female, very successful entrepreneurial female in Chicago, too. Yeah, so that was involved with Nike Run Club. Unfortunately, Nike Run Club is no longer. Made a lot of amazing friends through that experience. So now I am involved in a lot of different groups. I've always been kind of somebody who, I don't necessarily anchor myself down to one group because I just have friends in lots of different areas and like to be able to kind of come and go in different groups and be supportive of all of them. And for me too, it's been great because sometimes people see me as an ambassador to Chicago running community. And so I'm able to give truthful experiences of different running crews in Chicago and be able to like guide people or point them in the right direction if they're new to the city. Just in a coffee house the other day, and this guy overheard me talking to somebody else, one of my friends, about running, and he's like, hey, like, I don't mean to interrupt, but I've been meaning to get back into running, but don't really know like what groups there are or how I can get involved. So I was like, well, where do you live? And well, there's this group if you want to do that, and then there's this other group if you're interested in doing more like legit training. So I was able to kind of connect that individual to find a community to jumpstart his running again. But Specific groups that I'm a part of are 3 Run 2, which is a big crew running group here in Chicago, and then Heartbreak Hill Running Company, or Heartbreakers, is another one that I've run with as well.
Yeah, definitely big running groups out there. How do you balance that with your running your own business and then being really involved in those groups, and then on top of it going speaking out to different groups, just being in all that you're involved in? How do you balance that on your schedule?
So for me, I do try to make a priority of relationships and friendships. And a lot of my friendships are through running groups. And so for me, instead of going to the movies with a friend or going out and getting drinks with a friend, I honestly would rather go run with a friend. So that's oftentimes how I stay connected and balance it out, is that's my social time, is running with people. And also for me, I have spent very little money over the past 3 years on marketing with my business. Luckily, Instagram and Facebook are free and most of the time, but I've just done word of mouth. Literally, my first couple clients that I got, I was just running with them. Maybe it was Nike Run Club, maybe it was November Project, which I've been a part of before. Still support, definitely. Just running with people, and those connections have still lasted. People still send people my way because I ran with them and maybe gave them some nutritional advice. So here's to all the listeners: if you're in Chicago and you want to go run, you may get some free nutrition advice from me if you want to go for a run together.
Yeah.
I know some heartbreakers got kind of paired up with me on a long run once, and they finished and they're like, I didn't know I was going to get some really great nutrition advice on this 15-mile run. And I was like, you never know what you're going to get on a long run in Chicago.
Nice. They can run and learn at the same time. Best of both worlds.
Exactly. Exactly. So yeah, I think it's not easy to balance it all, but I think it's finding those priorities. For me, I want to build my business and build my brand, but I don't necessarily want to do that at a sacrifice that I'm not able to be social and also do a little bit of training myself.
Yeah, that's really good point. I guess question coming from, well, you came from Ohio to Chicago, so I guess maybe just in general for our listeners just across the U.S. that are moving to maybe just graduate from college or switching a job or in a different career, or relocating, etc. What's good tips to kind of break the ice in regards to they move into a new city or a new area and they're looking to run or get nutritional advice from someone like yourself?
Yeah, so I'd say the first thing is if you're looking for a run group, that's something you really did in where you lived before. Really, Google, honestly, Google free running groups. They're everywhere. And, a lot of the organizations I mentioned before, they're in other cities besides Chicago too. So I guarantee that the city you're at has some sort of running group. Maybe it's not free, but it has something. And if you don't have just that, from a nutritional standpoint, also just seeking out, finding a dietitian that you respect or that you see on Instagram and asking hey, I'm looking for some nutrition advice. Do you know somebody who lives in the city or is around that area? A lot of dietitians I know that I'm friends with, we do remote type of coaching as well. So even if it's not necessarily in the city that you are, if you're not in Chicago, I still do nutrition coaching for people outside of Chicago or Illinois as well. So, it's not necessarily that you're just stuck with the people in the city you're moving to.
Really good point. Yeah, it's really key because I think there's a lot of people out there that are afraid to reach out for others for advice or if they need some kind of support. That's awesome that you're very welcoming, and like you mentioned before, you have a big reach in regards to not just the Chicago but all over.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is a lot of the friendships and relationships I've built, whether it be in New York or Boston or Ohio or Chicago, if you look at my, the statistics that Instagram gives, that's typically where most of my followers or connections are happening. So really try to make my information kind of reach beyond just Chicago, beyond just the Midwest. Because I know there's a lot of runners out there, just active individuals that don't just live in Chicago.
I guess Chicago travel or just work-wise too. Talked a little about daily grind-wise, but what's happening daily grind down the road, Lydia, after this podcast?
Oh, so much is going on. I feel like it's a never-ending thing, but it's all good stuff, and it keeps me busy, and I'm always coming up with new ideas of things to do. So, kind of coming up next, coming down the pipeline. For me, from a work standpoint, I'm actually working with some other actual elite athletes and some other individuals on a program called Endeavor Run, which is a program that was kind of created by some other runners who felt like wanting to train like an elite athlete or a pro athlete shouldn't just be reserved for pro athletes, but providing that kind of opportunity for any runner who wants all of those amenities or all those different things provided to them. And so I'm actually working with them to create a nutritional component because, like myself, believing that it is the missing key for many runners, they also believe that as well. So kind of working on that, and that just got launched, and we're opening that program up to people. So that's been a really cool experience to open that up and see people interested in it. We actually did like a live watch party, which I've never done before, of us and like the whole team watching the New York Marathon, answering some nutrition questions, myself, and then Matt Fitzgerald, who's another sports nutritionist and high-level athlete runner himself. So that's been a really cool experience to launch that. So still continuing to work on that. Mm-hmm. And then, it's becoming the holiday time. So I've got a lot of like how to navigate the holidays, how to avoid holiday baggage type of presentations coming up for different groups in Chicago, getting that stuff kind of ready to go and help kind of teach athletes and active individuals how to have mindful exercises and mindful eating mindsets going into the holiday period, so that way they can still train and have their goals but not feel the guilt from food that sometimes they might feel.
I know myself personally, I know there's other people out there, or a ton of other runners, walkers, athletes that try to seek that balance when the holidays are coming up so quick, just right around the corner. Are you training for any races right now at for the rest of 2019 or early 2020?
Yeah, so I actually just started a 5K training plan. So for me, when I finished the Berlin Marathon, I kind of made a decision that I dealt with a lot of injuries and, kind of up and down for pretty much all of 2019, and a lot of 18 as well. And so I kind of decided I wanted to give myself a full year to train for a marathon. So I want to kind of focus in on speed and the fundamentals, so like strength training, and really kind of put those main base components in early on. And so that's what I'm training for, a 5K. I haven't signed up yet for one, but I think it will probably be the F3 5K that's at the end of January. There's not too many 5Ks in the Midwest at this time of the year. That gives me enough time to really train for it. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to be training for a 5K and then maybe a half marathon in the springtime of 2020 and then a fall marathon. Don't know which one yet. So if any of the listeners have recommendations, let me know. If we end up being Chicago, we'll see. I know I already had to sign up for that, but sometimes there's always fundraising groups as well to do that. So that's why I don't necessarily make the decision right away, but we'll see what comes in 2020. But no more races probably for me in 2019. Maybe I'll do a turkey trot for fun, but no real serious races left for me in the rest of this year.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, that sounds like a really good game plan. Well, if you're interested in turkey trot, I have my turkey trot for my foundation coming up end of this month, basically. If you're willing to travel to Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Well, I'll share with you more info later.
Yeah, share that with me. Wisconsin's great. I would love to travel for a race, so let me know that information.
Definitely. Do you have a word of the day for our listeners out there?
Yeah, so for me, this is something that, and you kind of said it in my bio, I help people define the best version of themselves. But a phrase that I've lived by for many, many years, pretty much since college, was you define your success. So you define your success. No one else can define it for you, but that statement just really empowers whatever success means to you. So that's kind of the phrase that I live by every single day, and I try to empower that on other individuals.
That's great. That's super motivational. I like it. Lydia, how can our listeners reach out to you after this podcast if they have questions, comments?
Yeah, so Yeah, and I hope they have questions and comments for sure. So they can reach out to me. Instagram is usually the best form of communication with me. So my Instagram handle is Run with Nader, and that's actually most of them across the board, whether it be Twitter or Instagram. So you can reach out to me via Instagram. The website is also www.runwithnader.com. If you put that, Ralph Nader may come up in Google searches, but I guarantee it's mine is Run with Nader. And yeah, they can reach out via that and ask me nutrition questions. And maybe if they have some specific ones, it'll be featured on the Wisdom Wednesdays.
I like it. Yeah, this is great. We'll put Lydia's contact info in our show notes for today's episode. Thanks again, Lydia, for coming on to our episode and sharing your story, whether it comes to running, entrepreneurship, nutrition, basically you name it. Hit Lydia up if you need or are seeking nutritional assistance or support via whether you're an athlete or training for a marathon or any other goal that you have in mind. When it comes to sharing the Daily Grind story with you, our website is www.kjfwi.org/thedailygrind, all hyphenated. You can listen to us on multiple avenues: YouTube, Spotify, iTunes. Question, comments for your host Kelly, hit me up on Twitter at KellyJLefty or Instagram me at the same KellyJLefty as well. Thanks again, Lydia, for being on our episode today, and thank you all for tuning into the Daily Grind. Have a great day.